Aron West, welcome back to the Cardboard Herald. We're talking on the precipice of the Catacombs Monster Pit Kickstarter. You have got to be excited, man. This represents a lot. This is what, the 10th anniversary of Catacombs that's happening now?
Yeah, that's right. Yep, 10 years that I've been publishing board games. So yeah, it's an event.
10 years on this unexpected journey. Like, what was your life trajectory beforehand, before you got together with your friends? You came out with this surprise hit beast, this dexterity dungeon delve Catacombs. I mean, I gotta imagine in some ways it kind of took your life in a different direction than you may have expected.
Oh yeah, it sure did. I mean, I was doing software development, and we still treat a lot of our development process, having techniques being influenced by that background. But yeah, eventually the board game and the various Kickstarter campaigns crowded out that part of my life.
You got all these Catacombs games coming out. You've just released Catacombs Cubes, which was still within the same universe, but quite the divergence, kind of opening up the dimension of what Catacombs represents and kind of the possibility space going forward. But we're here to talk about Monster Pit. So what is this game? This is like a standalone game. It's got two different modes, and it's also compatible with Catacombs 3rd edition proper. So why don't you give me kind of the like overview pitch of what this is?
So in Monster Pit, you're defending a town, first of all, okay? And that's a fully cooperative game, and you can play that solo, and then you flip the playmat over. The Kickstarter version includes a playmat, and then you go underground into the monster pit itself to continue the confrontation with that catacomb lord and hopefully emerge victorious.
First off, I love the concept of like bisecting a game and having two halves, and they can be played independently, right? Like if you wanted to, you could just have an evening where you're playing the dice game and then an evening where you're playing the 1v all monster pit arena, whatever madness that is.
Yeah, that's right. You could do that. I mean, the games are probably compact enough that you could play them as intended, from one half to the other. I mean, really, the town defense game, if you want to call it that, it really mirrors the part in Catacombs 3 where you're trekking through the various rooms to ultimately reach the catacomb lord's lair. And then the dexterity mode on the other side of the playmat is a full-on competitive experience. We're using our dexterity game system, of course. And some of the mechanics that we're introducing there are different from 3E, but the heroes that you're playing as are fully compatible.
And are there persistent elements that carry over from one side to another? Like, I'm thinking of actually one of my favorite games that doesn't get enough love is Hunt for the Ring, which was a hidden movement game that's kind of like a spin-off of War of the Ring. But it was one of the first games I played where it kind of bisects into these two different modes. There's familiarity between them, but the kind of cool element is the outcome of the initial mode will affect the standing of both sides when you go into the second mode. So is there some of that here? Is it just, if the heroes lose, then you start all over again? Or no matter what, is there going to be continuity and it just kind of affects some of the statuses or maybe certain metrics as you proceed into the second mode?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, obviously, people are free to role play a bit as to how they want it to proceed, but there will be rules that affect the continuity between the two modes. Like you said, affecting some of the stats and things like that. And certainly, there is continuity with respect to the catacomb lord that first initially menaced the town. You're going to be fighting that same catacomb lord again, but of course, this time, instead of it being on your turf or the town, it's on his turf underground.
So as far as dexterity games go at this point, you have going parallel, Catacombs Third Edition, you have Catacombs and Castles, you have Catacombs Conquest, the real small box game that's driven by a card-based system. And at this point, you are now introducing yet another Catacombs dexterity game that's being played independently of Third Edition, the core thing. And while these have ways of integrating with that kind of core master set, these really are independent and parallel games. Do you ever worry about brand confusion as you're coming out with yet another Catacombs release?
Well, I think that's always a risk, but at the same time, I'm confident that this version is different enough from what we've done before. It really allows us to go back and examine some of the early choices that we made that still informed a number of the decisions in Catacombs 3E, and we don't necessarily have those same constraints in Monster Pit, but at the same time, we kind of go full circle because the Catacomb Lords that you play in Monster Pit with the dexterity game and also in the town defense game as well, they have those nice big player boards that we used to use, right? In fact, I've got one right here. You can see this is, a first edition player board.
I love it.
And you've got all your rules on it and all that sort of thing. And then we kept that in Catacombs 3E, but of course, a lot of that information translated onto cards for maximum reuse. But the Catacomb Lords in Monster Pit have their own dedicated player board, just like first and second edition. And the tracking board is separate. So you actually have like a pretty big dashboard in front of you when you're playing as the Overseer. And of course, the heroes have their player boards as well, because they will have one player board on one side for the town defense game, if you like, and then you flip that over and they have their cards slots for their heroes and upgrades and things of that nature for the dexterity game.
Well, you just showed off some of the first edition Catacombs playmats, and that had that original, to me, iconic artwork. Like, what I love about it is it has this really gothic, semi-realistic presence, especially compared to what Catacombs is looking like these days, which, of course, having Kwanchai Moria do the artwork for third edition, that was a big part of the breakthrough into the mainstream with Catacombs, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I love how Catacombs looks, but that old art style, I feel like somehow that's indicative to the original heart and intent and tone of Catacombs. And as you reflect on the last 10 years and kind of thinking about the future 10 years, do you see space for Elzra to kind of explore kind of different tones than what established Catacombs' colorful, cartoony, fun, cutesy look represents right now?
Well, actually, that's a great point, because Monster Pit does attempt to go back to some of that dark Gothic type style. The Kickstarter version of the box is very much this color theme of black and red, which harks back to the original box cover of first and second edition, which had a very black brick-like texture with this red ring and the Catacombs logo. And that is, like a coming full circle on the Monster Pit box. And the tone of Monster Pit is definitely darker. The characters are darker. The overall presentation is darker, because I really want to convey that this adventure into the Monster Pit is not necessarily going to be easy for the heroes. This isn't your bright pastel dungeon crawl necessarily. It's you're going into this environment. It's dark, it's cold, it probably doesn't smell very good, and you've got to deal with that, and you've got to try and emerge victorious from some of the toughest characters in the Catacombs universe. So there there is that desire to have that black, red, gothic tone reassert itself again, even right here in the present in Monster Pit. So if you're expecting, the sort of cotton candy trees or whatever, third edition, this game will not necessarily have as much of that. It's definitely going to have a more serious, dark tone to it, but of course rendered in that, lovely Quanchai Moria art style.
One of the things that you mentioned earlier is that the dice portion of Monster Pit is going to be solo, which is great to hear, or it can be played solo. And that was one of the things that really excited me about Catacombs Cubes, is that it makes for a really good solo game. Like, I love playing it multiplayer, but if you got it, play it solo. Like, it's got a pretty interesting solo mode in there. But as we're thinking about quarantine right now and the kind of explosion of interest in solo games, have you given a lot of thought to developing a Catacombs dexterity game, like true to third edition dexterity game, that kind of cracks that nut of how do you make a solo dexterity joint?
Well, I think part of that experiment will be informed by our work on Phantom Division.
Okay, of course, yeah.
Phantom Division, you will be able to play it solo. And once we've put that system into a market tested product, I've already discussed this with the designers. There's very much the potential to take elements of the Phantom Division system and bring it over to a Catacombs 3E solo implementation. So that's something that I will be working on, because I think it's important to have that solo story, especially during these times.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to be excited about that. And it's a hard thing to address, but if you are able to create that system where it feels compelling to play, even if there's like static obstacles that you're fighting against, I think that it could be really something special. Now, with Monster Pit, I know that you've been kicking around some ideas for a long time for this project, and you're someone who takes a ton of feedback from users. Like, I see you addressing stuff all the time on BGG. I see you at conventions taking questions and, consulting people about what they think about various aspects of the games that you already have out, what they'd like to see in the future. And I'm wondering, like, what is the story for Catacombs Monster Pit in its current incarnation? Like, is this something that was entirely developed in-house? How did this come about?
It developed in-house in what sense? In terms of the mechanics or the story?
Well, I'm thinking about, like, the mechanics of the game. The game design. Is this something that was originally born out of you as the designer of Catacombs 3rd Edition and many of your games since? Is this something where you reached out to someone else? Are the two halves of the game designed independently? Like, what's the evolution of this up until this point?
Well, it has obviously gone through some evolutionary iterations, and there has been some design input from some other actors as well, let's say. But the holistic result that we have, was curated by myself, and I'm very pleased with how it's turned out, and I'm hoping that people enjoy getting it to the table.
What is like the killer moment for you, like the thing that's most satisfying in playing that? Because I know you're a gamer, I know you have a huge history of just like playing and observing different games. You and I have talked about various games that you've really latched on to, and also seen as like springboard points where you might even attempt to iterate on it in the future. But like, when you were playing Monster Pit, what's the moment where you're like, yeah, this is so damn cool that I'm doing this right now?
Well, I think it's really the opportunity to take the exploration of our Catacombs world to a whole new location. This is a new city, a new environment. It's actually a walled citadel, and then of course there's this cavernous environment below it, where all kinds of nefarious and belligerent creatures are, waiting to emerge. So just even the simple elaboration of that story and seeing that theme come out in the play mechanics is very, very exciting, because you do get the sense in the game that you are protecting the citadel. It's not a traditional tower defense game or anything like that, but you're first charged with protect the citadel, and then you're into the dexterity side, and to really feel like the game is building towards that crescendo of that, let's go and finish this thing and get it and get it done.
That almost sounds like the story arc of the game development and the ultimate Kickstarter and, resulting delivery of it too. That crescendo there, which is actually something I wanted to ask you about, and maybe that's a good way to kind of end this, is I've known you several years at this point. We've met at conventions. I've witnessed kind of the evolution to some of your approaches for your Kickstarters. I've seen you lead several successful Kickstarters and make sure that those products get delivered. You're very customer focused. But I know one thing that gets talked about a lot within the hobby is what are these established companies utilizing Kickstarter for? Like, leave that for the people who are just dreaming of making a game. What is Elzra doing kickstarting this next game? Because surely at this point you've had enough Kickstarters that you could totally fund this yourself, and this is just a pre-order service, right? That may be the perception of people. So, like, from your perspective, why should you still use crowdfunding as an established veteran company that has been making products for 10 years?
Well, I think there's a couple of answers to that. One is that we may be a veteran company, but we have a very, very niche type of game. Dexterity games, which we primarily publish at the moment, are a niche. And that's what we're trying to do with Monster Pit, like what we did with Cubes, is diversify that audience. If you don't like dexterity games, you would be able to buy the standard version of Monster Pit and enjoy the citadel defense, the town defense element of the game, and have some fun with it, and not even necessarily worry about the dexterity part, if you really viscerally didn't even want to get into that. And of course, that also implies that you can play and just back for that standard version, just as a solo player, and you're not paying for all those extra elements. And so, but to answer your question further about the crowdfunding situation, this is not a pre-order. We do need your help to make this. This is an ambitious project because we would also like to reprint the second edition of Catacombs and Castles. Okay, so that is going to be available as part of this campaign. Okay, and it's always easier when you can push everything through at one time. At least we find it easier. So we're looking to get Catacombs and Castles back into print, and also as a complementary product, reissue, I shouldn't say reissue, but we're going to issue Monster Pit too. So we really do need people's help and support. The retail market right now has been heavily impacted by the economic lockdowns and the global pandemic situation. So retail stores are not necessarily able to operate according, to maybe how they would like, because they're subject to these public health regulations. And as a result, they may be less inclined to take a risk on product or inventory that may sit there. Okay, So, if you think about it, if you're a retail store, it might just be easier to order another few cartons of Wingspan than bother with trying to research and stay on top of all the new product coming out in the hobby. And the same goes for licensed games. It's just easier to bring in a licensed title that's maybe gotten some good press and sell that rather than trying to bring in and keep up with all the new product that's being released. So the direct sales model is very important, and Kickstarter is one of those channels. Like, of course, we have shop.elzra.com for US and international customers. We have shop.elzra.ca for Canadian customers specifically. But Kickstarter does have that interactive platform and that place where we can set up our temporary catacomb, if you like, have the community there, host the community, and get their opinion about what they like, what they don't like. We can't make necessarily wholesale changes, but to your point earlier, I do listen to what people say. And if there's something, a good idea, for example, that emerges and we can implement it without detrimentally affecting the budget and the timelines and things of that nature, then I would look to do it. And certainly this time round with the stretch goals, I'm looking forward to hearing some more feedback from our players, because a lot of what was in our Icebox expansion for Catacombs 3E came from the community. People submitted suggestions. I vetted and curated those suggestions, and where we could implement them, we did it. And I'm happy to say it was easily 50 to 60% of the stretch goals that we put out were community driven. And I'm planning to do the same thing here with Monster Pit. In fact, instead of it being the Icebox, we're already planning for a black box, going back to that whole Gothic theme again that we were talking about earlier. So I'm interested to see what suggestions people have as to what we can put in the black box. And that'll be the stretch goals box for Monster Pit. So I don't even know what's in it yet, because I'm inviting our backers to tell us what they would like to see. And we will do our best to implement those suggestions that they have. And of course, we've got some broad ideas too that we can of course add some additional flavor to it, etc. We always have things that we can add to it. But I'm interested to see what people come up with. So that's the reason. So for us, even though we're established, we've been around the Kickstarter block, Kickstarter always has new things to teach you. We never take backers' support for granted. We always know that people can always take their virtual pledge and go just 2 clicks away to somebody else's campaign. But we hope that you stick with us, and there'll be a lot of options in this campaign to either get what you may have missed, order what you've already missed, or upgrade during our custom Elzra Pledge Manager, adding on other things that may not be the focus of the campaign, but you will be able to buy them. So in Cubes, we didn't really do that. We didn't have a lot of extra material available in the Pledge Manager. But this one, we are planning to open it up. There'll be some different things that, of course, you can add in the Pledge Manager. So that's we're not CMON. We're just a couple of guys working hard, trying to pay the grocery bills. And we appreciate your support as we keep moving forward and hopefully keep making games that the community enjoys.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the show. Everyone, go out and check out Monster Pit. I'm going to have links in the video description and the podcast description in order to find the Kickstarter for that. We'll have all the dates and information. If you are watching or listening to this after the Kickstarter has already happened, then I'm sure there's a whole host of information about possible late pledges or any way that you can kind of find out more information about what is kicking around at Elzra Games. Aron, thanks again for coming on to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Jack, and there will be late pledges.
If you enjoyed this video, we have all kinds of other reviews, interviews, and recommendations via writing, podcasts, and video here on our channel and website, cardboardherald.com. Our content is audience supported, so if you want to show your support, please visit our Patreon. Thank you so much for watching. This has been the Cardboard Herald.